So Prime Minister Boris Johnson held talks in Kyiv with President Zelensky this weekend in what has been described by Number 10 as a show of solidarity with the people of Ukraine. And senior officials in the President's team have praised the UK for support during its conflict with Russia.
Well, it's been quite the week, and I think seeing the reports of the missile at the train station, it just shows, can the Russian forces sink any lower?
Yeah, it's been difficult to watch the coverage that has been coming in. First of all, we had the coverage of Bucha and the fact that there were civilians lying on the road and the mass graves, and then these reports coming in of sexual crimes and using sexual violence against civilians. I mean, it really is very difficult to take the scale of it all in at this present moment in time.
Quite right.
And I think the fact that Russia has been repelled from the north, obviously it's a good thing that they've pushed back, but all the suggestions are that they're now going to concentrate on eastern Ukraine, on the Donbass area, which is at the centre of the conflict in the first place. Does that mean now that the battle becomes intensified because Russian forces are spread less thinly perhaps than they were, and they just now concentrate everything on winning control in eastern Ukraine? So I guess, on the one hand, it's good that Russia has been pushed back, but I don't think there's going to be any respite. In fact, the conflict could be just about to get worse. And I just think there needs to be more effort towards the whole idea of trying to get peace, in the short term at the very least, a ceasefire. And what concerns me slightly is a lot of political leaders seem to be doing a lot of sabre rattling at the moment, but not enough in terms of trying to bring the two sides together. I mean, I mentioned on the show last week the lack of input from the United Nations. You have to ask yourself, what is the United Nations for? It was created to help stop this sort of situation.
Well, there was finally a UN vote, though, of course, wasn't there?
There was, but what I don't think, Deanna, is there's been any kind of intensive effort from the UN or other international brokers, actually, to try to bring peace. I would like to see the UN, I would like to see church leaders across Europe. I'd like to see, all sorts of political leaders, people with influence saying, look, this is a roadmap to peace. Let's try to work towards peace rather than ramping up the rhetoric.
To be fair, some leaders have tried and reached out, and I'm not a big fan of President Macron, but he did try. President Erdogan of Turkey, he was trying. He brought people to Istanbul, you'll remember, a couple of weeks ago. But you're right about the UN. There hasn't been any sort of outreach, and it has led some people to ask, well, what is the UN actually for?
Well, exactly. I mean, as I say, it was founded after the Second World War to prevent, wars of that kind happening again, but even wars of this kind on a smaller scale. That was the purpose of the United Nations, and it just seems to have gone silent. It doesn't seem to be on the radar at all, and it seems to me that the only likelihood of peace is based on the Minsk agreements. Which managed to end the fighting after 2014 when it first started. And of course, the Minsk agreements are about, yes, on the one hand, securing the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which is important, but also understanding that in the east there are lots of ethnic Russians who do want some kind of autonomy or decentralization from Kiev. And it looked initially like Kiev was open to that. Which is why it bought into the Minsk agreements in the first place. But until that can be revived, then there's no chance of peace coming anytime soon, I don't think. Yeah,
and what worries me, I was reading this morning about this new Russian general that has been put in place. I think his name is, just to get it right, Alexander Dvornikov, and he was involved in Syria. And you'll remember in Syria there was widespread destruction and murder in Aleppo and homes and places like that. And apparently he has been in place now at the time that this attack happened at the railway station. And you have to ask yourself, is this a stepping up of that sort of thing, targeting civilians? And if we are going to contrast or concentrate on the Donbass region, what does that actually mean for civilians there,
I mean, some of the reports have been horrendous. At the railway station, where they were fleeing refugees, including children. Terrible. Anybody who thinks that those people are legitimate targets, I think doesn't belong in a civilised world, quite frankly. And it is important that where that stuff is happening, and Bucha as well, of course, that people are held to account. The only thing I would say it's eminently probable, I think, that Russia is guilty of war crimes. But I also think that we shouldn't just rely on media. There is such a thing as due process, which even at Nuremberg at the end of the Second World War, people understood there was still due process. And before, you declare people guilty or punish them, you actually try to build a case against them and build evidence. So it's important that we keep an eye on that, because the fog of war can blind people. Let's be honest.
I think your point there about sort of diplomatic kind of peacekeeping solutions, though, it must be so difficult, particularly for the Ukrainians who have been illegally invaded and see these atrocities kind of performed against their own people, with innocent, women, children, families losing their lives in some of the most barbaric ways. Surely that doesn't make you want to go to the table and negotiate, given the intensity of the sort of atrocities being committed against you.
I think that's right, and I think it's an entirely natural instinct when your homeland is invaded and your people are being violated in that way that you fight back. Completely understand why Ukrainians want to do that. But then I think it's up to other international brokers to try to work towards a ceasefire and say, look, this fighting needs to stop. It's a waste of human life, and the two sides need to be brought together. And I just don't think there's been enough. I mean, I take your point, Arlene, about Erdogan and Macron, but I just don't think on the international scene there's been anything like the efforts towards a peaceful settlement, or indeed a ceasefire in the short term that there ought to.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.